My name is Nora Ellis. I am 30 years old, and I run one of the fastest-growing interior design firms in Nashville. 3 years ago, my ex-husband stood in our kitchen and told me I was wasting my life chasing a dream that would never amount to anything. Last Tuesday, he walked into my office with a lawyer and a stack of documents demanding 35% of that same dream. He sat down like he owned the place. Then I opened a folder of my own, and I watched the color drain completely from his face. But let me tell you how we got there. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and my assistant was supposed to be holding all my calls. I had a presentation for a hotel renovation project in 3 days, and I was deep in material samples and lighting schematics when she knocked on my office door with that particular look she gets. The one where her eyes are apologetic before her mouth even opens. "There's someone in the lobby," she said carefully. "He says he's your ex-husband. He has a woman with him and a man in a suit carrying a briefcase." I set down the fabric swatch I was holding. "Did he say what he wants?" "He said it was a business matter." She paused. "He said it was urgent." I sat with that for a moment. My ex-husband and I had not spoken since the divorce was finalized 2.5 years earlier. Not a text, not an email, nothing. And now he was standing in the lobby of the firm I had built entirely without him, calling it a business matter. "Put them in the small conference room," I said. "Not the main one. The small one." She nodded and left. I took a breath and straightened the papers on my desk. Then I walked down the hall. When I pushed open the conference room door, the three of them were already seated. My ex-husband sat at the far end of the table, looking exactly the same as I remembered him, confident in a way that had nothing behind it. His mother sat to his right in a beige blazer, her hands folded on the table. The man in the suit, the lawyer, sat to his left with the briefcase open, papers already arranged in front of him. "Nora," my ex-husband said, and he smiled like we were old friends who had simply lost touch. I did not sit down. "You have 5 minutes," I said. "Tell me why you're here." His mother made a small disapproving sound. "Is that any way to greet people who came all this way?" "You weren't invited," I said. I looked at my ex-husband. 4 minutes and 50 seconds. He leaned forward slightly. "I'm going to be direct with you. Please." He nodded toward the lawyer, who slid a document across the table. I didn't pick it up. "This firm," my ex-husband said, "was developed during our marriage. The concept, the early client relationships, the brand direction. I was part of those conversations. That gives me a legal stake in what you've built." I looked at the document without touching it. "You're claiming partial ownership," I said flatly. 35%, the lawyer confirmed. "Given the circumstances of the firm's development, we believe that's a fair and conservative." "And if I don't agree?" I asked. My ex-husband's expression shifted just slightly. "Then we file. And we let the courts decide." His mother straightened in her chair. "Nora, this doesn't have to be difficult. You've done well for yourself. Surely you can afford to be reasonable." I looked at her for a moment. Then I looked back at my ex-husband. "I'll need a few days to review this with my attorney," I said calmly. He seemed to relax a little. "That's all we're asking. Just review it. I'll be in touch," I said. I opened the conference room door and held it open. He stood, buttoning his jacket. "You know," he said as he walked past me, "this doesn't have to be adversarial. We could structure this as a real partnership. There's a version of this where everyone wins." I said nothing. His mother gave me a long look on her way out, the kind she had been giving me for years, the one that said she had never thought I was quite enough. The lawyer followed behind them with his briefcase. I stood in the empty conference room after the door closed, and I did not feel afraid. I did not feel angry, exactly. What I felt was something closer to clarity, because I had known this moment was possible. I had been preparing for it for a long time. Let me tell you about my ex-husband. We met when I was 24. I was doing freelance decorating work on the side while holding down a full-time job at an architecture firm, taking every small project I could find, building a portfolio, one living room, and one coffee shop renovation at a time. He was charming and certain about everything in a way that I mistook for stability. We dated for 1.5 years, and then we got married. In the beginning, he was supportive. Or at least I believed he was. He would listen to me talk about my plans, about wanting to build my own firm. about the clients I wanted to work with and the kind of spaces I wanted to design. He would nod and say things like, "You're talented and that sounds amazing," and I took those words at face value. Then so slowly I didn't notice it happening. The tone started to change. The first time he told me the idea was unrealistic, I thought he was just being cautious. The second time, when he said that the market was too competitive and that I didn't have the business experience to survive it, I thought he was being practical. By the third and fourth and fifth time, it had stopped feeling like caution and started feeling like something else entirely. "You're a good decorator," he told me one night, sitting on the edge of our bed while I was going through projected costs for a business plan I had been developing for months. "But running a company is different. You don't have the head for it." I looked up at him. "What does that mean?" "It means you're creative. That's your strength. But the business side, the finances, the client management, the contracts, that's not you." I closed my laptop. "You've never run a business either," I said. He shrugged. "I know enough to know what I don't know." His mother was worse. She never said anything directly unkind, but she had a way of asking questions that were designed to sound like concern while actually being undermining. Things like, "Are you sure this is the right time, sweetheart? The economy is so uncertain," or "Has Nora thought about what happens to the household finances if this doesn't pan out?" She asked those questions to my ex-husband, not to me, as though I wasn't in the room. What neither of them knew, what I had never told either of them, was that I had already done something. Quietly, privately, 8 months before we got married, I had officially incorporated my firm. I had filed the paperwork, opened the business account, registered the name. I had done it on my own, with my own money, with no input from anyone in my personal life. It was mine before he ever became my husband, and I had kept it dormant during the marriage, adding to it slowly, building the foundation in the background while I figured out how to make the leap full-time. I had not told him because the moment I tried to talk about the business seriously, the conversation would inevitably drift toward all the ways it might fail. I had stopped wanting to defend it to someone who was supposed to be in my corner. So I kept that part of my life separate. The marriage lasted 4 years. The last one was the hardest. He never did anything dramatic. There was no single explosion. No defining moment I could point to and say, that was it. It was quieter than that. It was the slow accumulation of feeling invisible inside my own home. It was watching him make decisions about our life without consulting me and then presenting them as settled. It was his mother calling every week to check on him as though I were a housemate rather than his wife. It was the gradual realization that he had not married a partner. He had married someone he expected to remain small. When I told him I wanted a divorce, he seemed more surprised than hurt. "You're making a mistake," he said. "I've made bigger ones," I told him. We divided what little we had without much conflict. I took my car, my furniture, my portfolio. He kept the apartment. We signed the papers, and that was that. His mother called me once afterward to tell me I was foolish, and I let that call go to voicemail. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I took my firm out of dormancy. I moved into a small studio space with secondhand furniture and 2 client referrals from people I had worked with years earlier. I worked 16-hour days for the first year. I ate cereal for dinner more nights than I can count. I missed holidays and birthdays and social events because I was on site or on the phone or rebuilding a proposal that a client had rejected. By the end of the second year, I had a team of 6 and a waiting list for residential clients. By the time my ex-husband walked into my lobby, I had 14 full-time employees, a hospitality division, and a contract with a regional hotel group that was the largest project my firm had ever taken on. I had not built any of that during our marriage. I had built it after, alone, from something that had been legally mine before he ever put a ring on my finger. The day after they came to my office, I called my attorney. Her name is Claire, and she has handled my business contracts since almost the beginning. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment on the other end, then she said, "You incorporated before the marriage. 8 months before. And the dormancy period is documented? The original filing dates are clean? Everything is on record with the state," I said. "Incorporation date, my name as sole owner, the original operating agreement. None of it changed during the marriage." I heard her exhale slowly. "Nora, they have nothing." "I know," I said. "But I want to do more than just defend myself. Another pause. What did you have in mind? I told her. She was quiet for a longer moment this time. Then she said, that's going to take a few days to prepare. I have a presentation on Friday and a team meeting Thursday morning. I said, schedule it for Thursday afternoon. I spent the next 2 days working normally. I finalized the hotel presentation, reviewed 2 new client proposals, had coffee with a contractor I had been working with for a year and a half. I did not tell my team anything beyond that we would have a brief all-hands meeting Thursday afternoon. I kept everything calm and routine because there was no reason for it to be otherwise. On Thursday morning, I got to the office before anyone else. I made coffee and stood at my window for a while, looking out at the street below. I thought about the night I sat on my kitchen floor in the apartment after the divorce, surrounded by boxes of samples and a laptop with 17 open tabs, eating cold pasta, and genuinely not knowing if any of this would ever work. I thought about calling my ex-husband then to tell him something. I could never decide exactly what. I never made the call. I thought about that night now without sadness. Mostly, I felt grateful for it. At 2 o'clock, my entire team was gathered in the main conference room. Claire had arrived an hour earlier with a colleague from her firm and a financial consultant I had worked with the previous year. My operations manager, a sharp woman who had been with me since year 1, had set up the projector and arranged the room without being told what any of it was for. She trusted me enough to do that, and I felt that trust like something solid. My ex-husband arrived at 2:15 with his lawyer and his mother. I had not told him to bring his mother. She came anyway, which told me everything about how confident they were feeling. He looked around the conference room and seemed mildly surprised by how many people were there. He covered it quickly. He shook a few hands and made brief small talk with 2 of my senior designers as though they were colleagues of his. His lawyer sat up at the far end of the table. His mother took a seat near the middle, looking pleased with herself. I let them settle. Then I stood. Thank you all for being here, I said. I called this meeting because a matter came to my attention earlier this week that affects this company, and I believe in handling things openly rather than behind closed doors. I looked around the room at my team, at Claire and her colleague, at the financial consultant. Then I looked at my ex-husband. You've made a claim, I said. I want to address it properly. He nodded as though I were doing him a favor. His lawyer cleared his throat and began outlining the claim. 35% ownership, based on the assertion that the firm's foundational concept had been developed during the marriage and that my ex-husband had contributed to its early direction. He spoke in smooth, measured tones. He used phrases like collaborative development and reasonable equity interest. He presented it as a perfectly logical, practically inevitable conclusion. When he finished, the room was quiet. I said, "Thank you. Now I'd like to address a few things." Claire opened the folder in front of her and placed a document on the table, passing copies down both sides so that everyone in the room received one. "This is the original certificate of incorporation for Ellis Design Group," I said, "filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State. You'll notice the date at the top of the first page." My ex-husband looked down. I watched his eyes find the date. I watched something shift behind them. "That date is 8 months before our wedding," I said. "This firm was legally established, named, and registered in my name alone before we were married. Every document, every filing, every amendment over the course of this company's existence lists me as the sole owner. My name, no one else's." His lawyer was already looking at the document closely. Furthermore, Claire said, sliding another set of papers down the table, "Here is the original operating agreement, also predating the marriage. And here are the bank records showing the initial capital investment, which came entirely from personal savings my client had held in her own account for several years." His mother looked at my ex-husband. Something unreadable passed between them. "The claim," Claire continued, "that this firm was developed during the marriage is factually incorrect. The legal foundation of this company predates the marriage by 8 months and was built entirely on my client's prior labor, savings, and professional relationships." The lawyer was writing something down. He looked up and began to speak, something about goodwill and professional development during the marital period, but I raised my hand gently. "I'm not finished," I said. The financial consultant opened his own folder. While reviewing the circumstances of this claim, I said, we also became aware of something else. I paused for just a moment. Over the past 18 months, someone has been contacting two of our long-standing clients. Specifically, a residential developer and a hospitality group we've worked with for over a year. This contact involved sharing selective and misleading information about the firm's history and my professional reputation. Both clients flagged it for us. We have the communications. The room was very still. My ex-husband looked up. One of those clients nearly walked away from a contract renewal, I said. They came to us directly because they wanted to give us the chance to respond. We did, and they stayed. But the intent was clear. His mother had stopped looking pleased. She was looking at her hands. What I'm describing, Claire said, is tortious interference with business relationships. And we have documentation tracing those contacts. My ex-husband stood up. That is absolutely not. We have the emails, I said quietly. I did not raise my voice. We have the name the account was registered under. We have the IP address. My IT team has been very thorough. He sat back down slowly. I let the silence hold for a moment. I want to be very clear about something, I said, looking at him directly. You told me I didn't have the head for business. You told me I was good at decorating, but that the real work, the part that actually mattered, was beyond me. Your mother asked, in front of me, more than once, whether I had really thought through what would happen if I failed. You both watched me build this and decided that the right response was to walk in here and try to take a piece of it. His mother opened her mouth. I'm not finished, I said again, still calm, still even. I spent 4 years being quietly told I was smaller than I was. I spent another 3 years proving that wrong. What is sitting in front of you right now is the original incorporation date of a company that has been mine since before I ever shared a last name with you. You have no claim here. You never did. The lawyer closed his folder. He leaned toward my ex-husband and said something quietly. My ex-husband stared at the table. The documentation we've compiled regarding the interference with our client relationships has been forwarded to our legal team, Claire said. We are prepared to pursue that matter formally unless you withdraw the ownership claim in writing by the end of business on Friday and sign a letter of non-interference going forward. It was quiet enough in the room that I could hear someone's phone vibrate in their pocket. My ex-husband looked up at me. I expected anger, or defensiveness, or that particular brand of dismissal he had always been good at. What I saw instead was something I hadn't expected. He just looked tired. We'll withdraw, he said. His lawyer looked at him quickly. Brandon, we should discuss. We'll withdraw, he said again. His mother said nothing. She did not look at me. They gathered their papers slowly. The lawyer snapped his briefcase closed. My ex-husband pushed his chair back and stood, and for a moment he just stood there, not quite looking at me. For what it's worth, he said finally. It isn't, I said. Not unkindly, just honestly. Not anymore. He nodded once. Then he walked out. His mother followed him without a word. The lawyer went last, and then the door closed, and the room let out a collective breath that it had been holding. My operations manager caught my eye from across the table and gave me the smallest nod. Claire gathered her documents efficiently, the way she always does, already moving on to the next thing. She would have the written withdrawal in hand by Friday morning. I already knew that. After the meeting ended and most of my team had filtered out, I stood by the window in the main conference room for a few minutes. Not celebrating exactly, but feeling something I didn't quite have a word for. Not relief, because I had never been afraid. Not triumph, because it had always been clear this was mine. Something quieter than both of those things. I thought about the woman who sat on her kitchen floor after her divorce eating cold pasta in an apartment that felt too big and too quiet, with 17 tabs open and a business plan that existed mostly in her head and in a filing date no one else knew about. I thought about how certain she had been, underneath all the exhaustion, that she was going to make it work, not hoping. Certain. She was right. I went back to my desk. I had a hotel presentation to finalize. That evening, I drove home along the long way, the route that takes me past the neighborhood where I grew up. I don't know why I went that way. I just felt like it. The city was golden in the late light the way it gets in early fall, that particular shade of afternoon that makes everything look a little more significant than it probably is. My phone buzzed. A text from one of my senior designers. She had found the perfect stone tile for the hotel lobby floor and was sending photos and asking if she could call. I sent back a string of question marks and the word yes immediately, and my phone rang before I'd even put it back in the cup holder. We talked for 20 minutes about stone tile and natural light and the exact right proportion of warm tones to cool, and by the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made 3 decisions about the hotel project and completely forgotten to think about my ex-husband at all. I think that was the best part of the whole day. Friday morning, the withdrawal letter arrived at Claire's office at 9:47. She forwarded it to me with a single line, "All done. Call me if anything else comes up." I printed it, signed the acknowledgement copy, and filed it in the cabinet behind my desk. Then I closed that drawer and got back to work. There is something I want to say to anyone who has ever had someone stand in front of them and tell them quietly, or not so quietly, that they are less capable than they know themselves to be. It might be a spouse, a parent, a colleague, a friend who should have known better. The specific face changes, but the message is always the same. The version of you that believes in what you're building is naive, and the version of them that doubts it is wise. Don't argue with them. I wasted years having that argument, trying to prove through words what I eventually just had to prove through work. You cannot convince someone to believe in you who has decided not to. What you can do is take what you know about yourself and put it somewhere they can't reach it. Build the thing quietly. Keep the paperwork clean. And when the time comes, and it will come, let the documents speak. They are louder than anything you could say. The hotel presentation went well. The client approved the full concept, including the lobby stone tile my designer had found the night before. We start on site in 6 weeks. It is the largest project this firm has ever taken on, and every person who will work on it was hired by me, trained by me, chose to be here. My ex-husband thought he was coming to collect a piece of something I had built. What he walked into was the proof that I was right the whole time. I don't need him to know that. The incorporation date already knew it. It has known it for years.